Hey, good evening, everyone. Welcome to another money space with me, Kalu Aja. Of course, on our space, we're talking money, the economy, and of course, finance. And what a better time to talk about the economy, the global economy, the macro economy, what's going on in the world, how it affects Nigeria. Lots of things are happening with Nigeria and the war in Iran. And the war in Iran, really, really, if you look at it, it's just the war of the Hormuz, right? Because that has become the focal point of this war because it's a restriction of supply. And that supply restriction has, should we say, implications across the world. The world is driven by energy. And even though, hold up, even though we have Iran. I mean, 20% of the world's oil passes through the Straits of Hormuz. And when you restrict that supply from the world, you cause prices to go up. If energy prices go up, of course, you are looking more and more and more at a recession because more folks have got to buy the same quantity of oil, which we say more US dollars. Not just oil. I think the most important one, really, not just the oil, is the fertilizer because you have to have fertilizer to grow crops. And the problem with fertilizer is that it's got to be applied at a particular time. You can't apply your fertilizer during the rainy season when this is over. So there's a disruption in buying and supplying of that fertilizer. It's going to affect the whole economy. So we've got energy, we've got fertilizer, we've just got the uncertainty, really, right? About just where the market is going to. If you tune on the finance news, stocks are up, stocks are down. You look at Nigeria news, Naira is up, Naira is down. We really don't know what's going on. We're reacting to events far away. But as we can see, as every Nigerian can see, really, your should we say your pump price is now dependent on what happens in Iran. Whether there's a subsidy or no subsidy, that is now the truth. That whatever you pay as your fuel price retail in Nigeria is dependent on what happens in Iran, what happens at the Hormuz, and this has a knock-on effect on the economy of Nigeria, right? The GDP, the consumption, even the inflation. We've been talking about inflation coming down for the last 24 months. Now, clearly, inflation is going to go up. If it's going to go up temporarily and come back down, fantastic. If not, we're going to be in some pain here. So I have an economist here to talk to us, Mr. Wilson. I'm trying to add you. If you can request to speak, so we can add you in here, or go out and come back if it's giving you a problem. We have an economist here to just walk us through what is happening. We've titled the space, the risks and the rewards, and the macro risks and rewards. Are there risks? Are there rewards in what we are seeing? What should Nigeria have done prior to this? What can Nigeria do today? What is the economy of Nigeria? How is it set up? I just want to have a conversation with our economist. Once he can hop on the space, we will have him going. Now, yesterday we had a space and I mentioned a few things. I want to just run through them again before we have Mr. Wilson come on. I said that, there are three things Nigerians are looking at today. We have number one, we have the currency, we have the energy price. And I just want to make that point real quick. With the currency, you are more concerned with convertibility and stability, not the exchange rate. So this is not a time to say Naira is 140, Naira is 130. It's immaterial. What matters to you is, do you have a currency that you can spend and the value is not depreciated that much? So focus more now on the stability rather than the exchange rate, the daily exchange rate movement. With that, let me bring Mr. Wilson in here. Good morning, sir. How are you doing today? Or good evening. How are you doing today?
Good evening, Carlo, and good evening, everyone. I'm doing all right. Good to be here again.
Fantastic, sir. You want to introduce yourself just so folks know who you are, and then we can get started.
Yeah, I'm Wilson Erumebo. I'm an economist. I work on anything that has to do with macroeconomics, industrial policy, trade, structural transformation, and and basically how economies can grow and develop. So I work, with the Nigerian Economic Summit Group as a principal economist, and then I'm affiliated to several institutions. So I teach economic development of Africa at SOAS, University of London.
Yeah,
which is where I got my PhD from, and I do a lot of market-related consulting for some corporate clients as well.
Well, we're good to have you here. So again, you're a doctor. I know you're very modest. I want to say that. So just good to have you here, sir. So let's just start with the overview. So just to say, I don't know if you want to do before Hormuz, because Hormuz has sort of given us a new picture. But before we had the Iranian war, and that has changed everything. If you can take us back, just give us an overview. Where was the Nigerian economy in terms of the macro picture, inflation, GDP, consumption, export? Where were we before this whole crisis started? If you can just give us that overview.
Yes. So if you look at the economy, especially from the macro side, what you'd find is that we're coming basically from a crisis period. If taking us back to 2023, or 2022, when the war in Ukraine, started. And of course, as you know, with Nigeria, we're heavily exposed to global oil price. And of course, you also mentioned fertilizer as well. So with that war, we had a case where inflation, skyrocketed in Nigeria. We had foreign currency problems, government expenditure significantly affected, and so all of that, happened in 2020, from 2022 all the way to 2023 and even 2024. But then I think the major shock, two major policies, the FX removal in mid-2023 and then the subsidy removal and the FX reforms that the central bank has implemented, sort of like brought, in a way, government had significant revenue, but at the same time, household, felt the in terms of declining consumption. So I looked at the household consumption data, right? So consumption used to account for 72% of our GDP. If you look at GDP by expenditure, as at 2021, household consumption was 72%. As at 2024, which is the latest available data, it has dropped to 40%. So you can see the significant decimation in household purchasing power as a result of particularly the removal. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you explain that in detail for us? So are you saying that we had 70% of Nigeria's economy was based on consumption before the fuel scarcity? You are saying it's now falling to about 42%. Can you just go into detail on that if you don't mind?
Yes. So when you look at GDP, I mean, for those that have some maybe background in economics, you would find that, we always talk about this C plus I plus G plus NX, which is consumption plus investment plus government expenditure, then plus net export, which is your export minus import. So that's basically what makes up your output, your GDP, by expenditure. It's almost like when you look at output, what do people produce in an economy? That's GDP by output. And then what do people spend their money on? What do people spend on in the economy? So that's GDP by expenditure. So typically for Nigeria, the consumption part, which is the C part, has always accounted for over 70% of the total GDP. So if you break down GDP by expenditure, consumption is 70%. Investment is somewhere around, 15%. If you look at real investment, net exports and, government expense. Government expenditure used to be somewhere around 5%, 6%. And then the final is net export, which is also around 5% or thereabout. So that has been the structure. We consume a lot. Investment is not so high, especially when you compare with, peer countries and other countries. For instance, countries like Indonesia, you would have a more share to investment. So investment would account for something around 30% of GDP by expenditure. But for us, it's 15%, or it was 15%. And then the consumption side in larger industrialized economy, the consumption side is not as high as 70%. You would imagine investment takes a bigger part. And then consumption is also important, I should say. But so what we've seen from 2021, where consumption was 72% of GDP, is a significant decline, to 40% in 2024. And I think this is not even news to Nigerians that the first subsidy removal led to significant inflation, decimated purchasing power of households, and it means that people are struggling. In fact, I would say that people are subsidizing the government now because it felt like all of the subsidy burden was transferred from the government to the people, and so that weight is what the people, you would see that everyone is carrying, and that's why consumption as a share of GDP has declined significantly. And so it's important for several reasons. I don't know if you want us to talk about that.
Yeah, we're going to that detail. I just want folks to understand that I've always said that consumption is one of the red flags not talked enough about in Nigeria, that we're not really consuming. And people think consumption is bad. If you're not consuming, the economy is not growing, SMEs are not hiring. That's just what it means. So when you say it has gone from 70 to 40, I think that just puts it in picture for everyone listening that this is really how bad the economy has become. This is what we should be tracking. Not really the inflation is down, but consumption has collapsed. So prices are quote unquote not rising as fast, but nobody's buying anything. That's rather crazy. Yes, sir.
Yeah, you're right. In fact, I then went further to look at the contribution to GDP growth from 2021 to 2024. So it's almost like the cumulative contribution.
Yeah.
I just wanted to see, I think this was something I was doing for someone. I just wanted to see which sector or which aspect of our GDP is driving overall growth. As you know, GDP also is increasing, but which aspect of the consumption is driving that growth? And one of the striking things is the NX aspect, which is the net export aspect. In fact, when you look at the figures, it contributed about 543% to overall growth, while consumption was a drag, by minus 529%. If you look at 2024 NBS figures,
what does that mean, sir?
So what it means is that in the last 3 to 4 years, what has been driving expenditure of GDP is not consumption. In fact, consumption is dragging overall GDP growth. What is driving it is net export. And net export consists of crude oil, other oil exports, and also all of the inflows that come into the economy from financial inflows. And so you can see that much of the growth we've had in the last couple of years has been externally induced, not necessarily domestic driven growth, where our businesses are growing, where we're producing more more goods from the real sector, where we're addressing some of the big constraints like electricity infrastructure, logistics, and the like. That's not basically what has been driving growth. When the year GDP grows by 3%, 3.2%, the attention is then where is it coming from? So it's mainly from the reforms that the central bank has implemented. As you know, interest rates are really high. That has attracted inflows into the economy. So that's one reason. Oil output has been improving, not so much. There was a time we used to do 1.1 million barrels, like 3,483 a couple of years ago. So it's gone to about 1.5. That's some increase. And so those are the major aspects of the economy that I would say the external side that is driving GDP by expenditure, which is, again, tells you that a lot needs to be done domestically so that the people can feel the impact of all of these policies.
Okay. All right. So we have GDP being driven by crude oil exports. So that just tells me that, listen, we haven't really diversified the economy, right? We've been talking diversification since before before when the military were here. We've not done that till today. We haven't diversified the revenues. We said the revenue base of the economy is still crude oil and gas, and I think that's what we're suffering today, because we haven't diversified. We are tied still to oil and gas, so we're now tied back to Iran when we have a nation that has all this cocoa and rubber and all that kind of stuff. So apart from GDP, so what about the inflation? That was the good news of the economy. Inflation was coming down. From the high 30s, now at the mid 15s, 13s, and the projection was that was going to continue. Can we talk about inflation?
Yes, for inflation, I used to say something about inflation that it's almost as I don't know if useless is the right word. Inflation rate itself is not so meaningful unless when you compare it with something else, right? So what I mean is, if inflation is coming down, you are more interested in how does that link with things like household consumption, right? If inflation is coming down, how does that link with interest rates, right? So I think that's one. So inflation is almost like one best way to look at it is relative, in relative terms. So we've seen that currently it's around 15%, according to the data from the National Bureau of Statistics, the NBS.
Yeah.
But again, what has happened to household consumption? As I mentioned, it's now 40% of expenditure.
Yeah.
So are people... can you say the purchasing power of people has increased significantly enough to warrant, that they can, buy goods, conveniently and affordably? So that's still a concern. If you then also go to the interest rate part, I think maybe that's where we've seen some progress. Real interest rates are, now positive. Interest rates are above inflation rate, which is, something good. But overall, I think that we're not where we used to be a couple of years ago, where prices are, were so high and inflation was around 33%, and then people were feeling it significantly. We're not where we used to be. We're a bit better off, but I would say that we're not, at the best place where we should be. Because ideally, we should even be targeting a single-digit inflation rate. There used to be a time when inflation rate was 6%. I remember under Sanusi, and those times we even used to complain. And we used to write report that this is too high. It should come down to 2-3%, and the likes. But here's where we are now. It feels like this is the new reality. 15%, 14%, is where we've been stuck at, over time. So there's still progress. Food inflation has been trending downwards, but still there's some vulnerability, especially given the recent fuel price increase and all of the things happening in Middle East.
All right. And again, so I looked at the inflation report. There's a report that ProShare did, where they did the 2025 and 2026 inflation numbers. I'm just posting on Twitter. So if you want to just look at the report, it's just I'm going to be my last post on Twitter now. I'm putting some tweets under the space. So just go to the space. You see the last tweet we did there. It will be under, you see the report from ProShare posting 2025 and 2026. So if you look at that chart, right, what they've done is they've broken down inflation in Nigeria according to the regions in Nigeria, the 5 regions, and they've compared it with last year. Something jumps up at you. You would see that the inflation rate, right, has fallen in the southeast, south-south, southwest states. And the inflation rate has gone up in the northwest, north central, and northeast states. I mean, drastic rise. So if you look at the the region, and especially food inflation. So they did a good job. They did headline inflation, they did food inflation. So you clearly see that in the Southeast, for instance, inflation is the lowest. So it has gone from 18 to 16 in the Southeast. And that has been driven by a corresponding fall in food inflation in the Southeast. Then you have the Southwest, South, the same thing. Food inflation falls, it drags down headline inflation. So it looks to me like where you have the insecurity in the North, that causes food inflation to stay up, and that causes headline inflation to stay up as well. So I don't know if you can see the chart I'm referring to.
Yes, I'm trying to, let me just hold on. Okay, yeah, I can see it now.
Yeah, so very interesting chart there, 2025, 2026, and then comparing the regions and comparing headline inflation, to food inflation. And you can see the connection there with food and headline. So because we always know that CPI, the Consumer Price Index, is in Nigeria, is about food. So if food prices go up, inflation falls. And we're seeing it basically play out here in that the regions that have the lowest inflation have the lowest cost of food, which is an irony in Nigeria, because you have states in the North Central that are actually called the food basket of the Federation. And they've seen inflation go up, and they've seen their food inflation go up. So is inflation now decoupled now? It's now, to me, I look at it as a security issue now, that if we don't bring peace and stability to the North Central, especially, we're not really going to fight inflation. If inflation monetary goes down to zero, we're still going to have food inflation, which is still going to drive headline inflation. That's the point I'm getting to. I want to know your thoughts on that.
Yes. Yeah, and you're right, because historically, food inflation has been a major driver of overall inflation. In fact, if you look at the 1995, when we started having consistent inflation data, if you look at the trend between food and overall inflation, you would almost think they're identical. They move out along the same line, and it's partly because, Nigeria, we spend a lot of our food. I think the last consumption survey showed that about 57% of our consumption goes to food, and then the remaining goes to transport, health, and the likes. So that's, part of the reason why whatever happens to food inflation is also very important. And it's also one of the reasons why some of us are a bit, I'm not sure if critical is the right word to use, about the central bank's approach, to inflation management. That if inflation has a lot of structural bottlenecks, that drives it, how can you then use monetary policy tools effectively to address inflation? I think that's, something we've debated, argued, discussed over the past, 4 to 5 years. That's how effective are these tools in managing inflation. And let's also remember that part of the decline we're seeing in inflation is also due to the rebasing, effects, which in a way, some of the numbers, you just showed that immediately after the rebasing, the inflation rate started dropping, and there's also that disconnect between what's happening in reality versus what the numbers tell, because I've looked at the numbers and, there's some, would I say, concerns, or questions that I still have, and even though we've engaged the NBS, but those questions still remain. So yes, you're right that there's a very strong link between food insecurity and food inflation. But we must also remember that there is also a component of imported inflation, that is extremely important as well. And given that we import a lot of things, and what's happening globally tells you that, we will still be exposed to that imported inflation, and it may even become more important now, especially given the high price of crude, high shipping and logistics costs, and many other issues happening elsewhere.
So and also, sir, just again to be clear, in terms of your take on this inflation fighting, do you think that the CBN should there's growth argument, there is the monetary argument of restricting money supply to avoid inflation. There's also the growth argument. Where do you think we should look at as Nigeria? We have high unemployment, growth is not as fast as it should be. The CBN is pursuing a monetary policy of high rates to restrict inflation, and I think the growth argument has not really come into the picture. What's your take? They are right. Their job is to fight inflation, but is there an argument to be made for allowing that, in air quotes, allowing a bit of inflation to stimulate the economy, to get consumption back on stream, to get SMEs lending, even if it's targeted lending like the former CBN governor should do? What's your take on that as well?
Yeah, I agree that growth should be part of the objective. Yes, price stability, but also because growth is important. But at what rate would inflation drive growth? At what inflation rate would growth happen? And I don't think that's around 15 at 15% where we are currently. So I think it's still too high. So one of the big concern is how low should you get inflation to the point that it doesn't affect growth, but at the same time, consumers can still buy and producers can still produce. So I think that's one key important aspect of inflation targeting that the CBN over the years has missed. But more recently, I've been seeing I've been invited to several conversations where the central bank is now trying to, adopt or embrace inflation targeting as it should be. Not necessarily, because right now, what's the central bank target for inflation? I don't think I've seen that anywhere.
When they started, when they're talking about two basis points or so, when they first of all started, not now. They were talking about having a band.
I remember when we hosted our macroeconomic outlook in Lagos, we invited the central bank governor and he came and he mentioned something about 19.4% inflation. That's what they wanted to achieve for 2024, right? But again, we missed that target. So how have we revised that? What's the target for this year? And with inflation targeting, that target is extremely important because what influences the choice of that target is the question is where should inflation be in such a way that it can stimulate growth and at the same time it will not be too much of a pain on households. Remember again, household consumption is 40%. So there has to be that balance between, all of the objectives of growth and affordability. And so that's where the target then comes in. And then the CBN makes a forecast that given current economic trends, like oil prices going up, fuel prices going up, where will inflation be in the next couple of years? So, for instance, you have a forecast and you have a target. Now, the gap between your forecast and your target depends on how much monetary policy tools can then be used. So if the gap is very wide, it means you can raise interest rates a bit more to cover that gap. So that's where that's the ideal way of thinking about inflation targeting, which I think and I hope that the central bank would be looking to adopt, especially given its more recent engagement on that. But yes, on the growth part, well, I think, given where we're coming from, Kalu, where there was significant abuse, in terms of central bank independence and how much can central bank lend to the federal government, ways and means, if you remember. I know you've complained and shouted about that. Some of those interventions, central bank was giving loans to rice farmers, was giving loans to businesses, and some of those things, we couldn't even track them to know how effective they've been. So I think the new central bank is trying to have that balance that, how much should CBN intervene in terms of achieving some of the developmental objectives? Shouldn't that be left to the development banks that we have, the DPN, the Bank of Agriculture, Bank of Industry? Shouldn't they be equipped more to play that role and let the CBN just focus on its core mandate? And I think, sure. I think that's, I think that position is even fair, especially given the fact that where we're coming from in the last couple of years where there was significant abuse. So that's one thing I like about the central bank governor and his stance on that. I think I agree with him on that. Let's see how we can equip BOI, recapitalization of these institutions, tying their loan portfolio that they give out to performance, to business performance, not just giving out loan and we hear audio announcement of 100 billion and we don't know who gets it. And we can't even track that who gets it is using it for production purpose or export purposes. So I think that those are the kinds of reforms where performance-tied loans is what we need for those institutions to be able to do well and impact the economy at large.
Gotcha. So let's now move over to post Hormuz. We've talked about the GDP, we've talked about inflation before Hormuz. Let's now talk about what's happening today because we have now seen there's a direct connection between Nigeria, Iran, and then this restriction of supply, which we're just calling Hormuz, for lack of a better word. So where are we now, sir? With the space is titled risks, rewards, and all that. We can see the risks daily in our lives when we go to pump gas in Lagos and the price has gone up, right? But where are we now? Do you want to start with the risks? Do you want to start with the rewards of these issues in Iran? Can you go ahead, sir? Pick where you want to start, from risks or reward.
I think for the reward part, it's very clear to everyone that high oil revenues, is what Nigeria would get, and that's relative. And there's a lot of caveats to that statement because again, high revenues. By that I mean referring to the benchmarks. If you remember, we have a budget that is predicated on a benchmark of 64. I think 64.5.
64, 67 or 64. Jeez, I'll check it real quick.
Yeah, you can check me. I think it was $64.5 per barrel. But I may be wrong, but it's around 60, mid-60s anyways. And then if you then look at outputs, it's somewhere around 1.87 million barrels a day.
64.85. 64.85 is the bank.
Yeah, so that's $65 per barrel. And then for output, where the output was 1.87 million barrels per day.
Wait, what output are you quoting, sir? What time?
Or the 2026 budget.
Oh, I see. Yeah, sure. You're talking about the budget numbers now.
Yes, the budget numbers. Yeah, so on the price side, Nigeria seems to be doing, well. And also, there's also a caveat there that average oil price from January till March 17th is somewhere around $76 per barrel. So we are about $12 or so, $11-12 above the budget benchmark on average throughout the year.
Yeah.
But where we will benefit, or how we will benefit, is if this crisis continues and oil price stays higher, for longer, for the remaining part of the year. So currently is around maybe 110 barrels, dollar per barrel, right? So it has to stay higher for longer for Nigeria to really, really benefit. And by benefit, I mean for oil price for oil revenue to actually exceed is significantly high and for a long period. Oil revenues will exceed its budgeted, higher than the outputs differential. I don't know if you get it. So that's one aspect of the revenue side, but it just means that, at least either the budget will be met or revenues will increase. As far as flows, you could have, more in a moment.
So let me take you up on that, sir. I don't know if you want to, if I can take it.
Yeah.
So yeah. I'm just posting something again. Nigeria's crude oil output is about less than 1.5. This is March 18th. Less than 1.5. So is that now going to be a factor that prices might get to 2?
It won't, because if you remember, if you look at the numbers, if we have, I want to see if I can do some calculations here. We achieve, let's say 1.5 throughout the whole year.
Mm-hmm.
There's a gap of 300, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if outputs, I'm not sure what percentage of 300 is in terms of 1.5, maybe, but if outputs, if prices then increase significantly by more than the benchmark price, So if, let's say, the gap between actual price and benchmark price for output for crude oil is, say, 50%, and then the output gap is 30%. Of course, Nigeria would gain more. If you get what I mean.
I get you. I get you, but
yeah. Okay. So it's more about how high can oil price stay and how long will oil price stay high. So if it stays high for long, the average oil, let's say $100 per barrel, our benchmark is already at 65. There's a $35 gain, already. Even if output does not increase by that magnitude in terms of percentage, then Nigeria is better off.
Yeah, but the argument is going to be that, right? So look at if I understand what you're saying, is like I have a store, I have 2 stores, and I was going to sell 2 bags of rice from those 2 stores for the whole year. But I've closed 1 store, and now I'm selling 3 bags of rice from 1 store. That's what I hear you saying, so that the revenues will still almost be the same, even from my 1 store, because I'm selling more bags of rice at the same price. But I mean, there's an opportunity cost there, isn't there? Because if we're at 1.48 million barrels, this is as March 18th, 1.48. Yeah. The budget is 1.7 million barrels a day. 1.7. This is 1.8 million barrels a day.
1.8, yeah.
This is 1.8. So already we've lost these barrels multiplied by the oil price. That's an opportunity cost. And again, the deficit also, because Nigeria is not, should we say, we are borrowing from day one, but the revenues are going to come later. So we already have a deficit that is already, we have to finance. We are carrying about 2 or 3 budgets. Will that not drag down that 300? I mean, it would not be better to have sold the 1.8 at $100 a barrel than what we're doing now, selling the 1.4 barrels at a higher price?
I understand you perfectly. So what you're saying is like the opportunity cost. So what we are losing by not meeting our budget target.
Correct.
So it's almost like saying, what you're saying is that we can exceed our budget target if we just maintain
correct
the output that we want, that we said we will achieve at the end of the year, the 1.8 million, that if we increase our output to 1.8 million,
correct,
we will be selling it at a much higher price than we anticipated in the budget. Yeah, that's also correct. But what I'm saying is that if prices increase at a much faster rate than the gap between our budgeted output and our actual output, Nigeria can still benefit. Of course, not as high as your own scenario, where if we're meeting our budget target, we will benefit. I don't know if you get what I'm saying.
No,
so
completely.
I just did a calculation now. Now, if you look at actual oil price from January to March 17th, right, the average is $76 per barrel. Now, in our budget, we plan for 65, so we're doing 76. That's a 17% difference. Now, if you look at output, we plan for 1.8 and we're doing 1.4. That's a minus 25% difference. So if you net this out, what you'd find is that Nigeria is currently not gaining, right? But what I'm then arguing is that if the actual average goes above 76 and maybe goes to 100, 110, you would see that our output loss of minus 25%, we would gain that from the price differential, because the price differential will be so high from 65 to 120 to be so high. So just think of it as you are producing goods in your shop. You have a shop, you produce 4 bags of rice. Before, you used to sell them at 10,000 Naira. All of a sudden, the price went up to 100,000, and you are selling those 4 bags of rice for 400,000 Naira.
Yeah.
Even though you agreed that you wanted to produce 10 bags of rice at the end of the year, you wanted to sell 10 at the end of the year. But what output would you have gotten if price did not increase? You would have gotten that 10 at 100,000 because 10 times 10,000. But because price has increased significantly, even if you didn't meet your target of 10, the price differential is working at your advantage. I mean, that's how I would think about this. That even if output did not increase, the price if the price differential is higher, Nigeria would still benefit. But this is not me saying that we should fold our arms and relax and not do anything to increase price.
Yeah.
I'm just an economist trying to play out all of the different scenarios. So the best and optimal option would be, how about us, trying to meet our target? But there are challenges, to be honest. I was speaking with one of the top guys he's an indigenous oil producer in Nigeria. He owned one of the top fields, and he was saying that there's been limited investment within that space in the last decade, that it's difficult for Nigeria to achieve some of these budgetary targets that were setting. So we need to start thinking of how do we attract new, fresh investment into the oil and gas industry, for that significant output that we all desire to happen.
Fantastic. So again, guys, once we get to the hour, if you want to ask the economist a question, we'll just add you. We'll just run through a few other issues. Okay, what about let's last one, sir, on the fuel price going up and down? Twitter is blaming Dangote. Twitter is not blaming Dangote. Where are we on this? Why is the pump price going up? If we have the largest refinery, maybe perhaps almost in the world, in Nigeria, we have crude oil. Could you give us an economist answer? Why should our pump price go up? If we have crude oil, we have Dangote refinery, why are we reacting almost immediately to Iran? I read a report that Nigeria's price hike has been the highest in the world. Why is this so?
Well, I think there are two things. One is that Nigeria still imports petrol. I checked the NBS data, as at Q4 2025, 27% of our total imports is, fuels, not just petrol, kerosene, all the other byproducts. So 27% is really high, despite Dangote refinery. And I should say that before, it used to be 40%. We used to do around 40, 37, 38%. But now it's reducing, exposed to international oil prices. And because petrol is a byproduct from crude oil, I mean, whatever happens to crude oil price then determines the price of petrol, regardless of whether, your ship passes through the strait or not. So that's one reason. The other also is when this debate came out about Dangote, I think they came out to say that even though they are buying their crude in Naira, the crude is still priced with international prices. So it tells you that, yes, Dangote is still getting his crude in maybe he's paying Naira for his crude, but at the same time, they are converting the international crude oil price to Naira to sell to him. So essentially, he's still paying the international crude oil price, for crude. And I think this is one major aspect that perhaps not many people are looking at. And it's beyond Dangote, it's beyond even the oil and gas industry. So since this refinery came on board, right, I think this is the first time that Nigeria is experiencing a significant increase in crude oil price, especially, after the war in Ukraine. This is the first time we're seeing crude oil price go above $100 and the likes, if I'm not mistaken. So, and it's causing a new problem for the economy. And that problem is, how do we then price our inputs? So it could be cocoa, especially inputs that are linked to international price, right? What mechanisms do we use do we price them based on, strictly international prices, or do we create some form of differentiated pricing for some of our products? Because what we're seeing now is almost like a contradiction that, yes, there's a refinery, the refinery is local, the refinery is producing, But at the same time, the crude that the refinery uses, even when he uses Naira to pay, is still benchmarked to global oil prices. So when crude oil price goes up, then it just means that domestic fuel price will automatically increase. And so, yes, we've achieved local refining, right? But I would say we've not achieved local price stability. I think that's a better way to put it. And it raises a deeper issue. It applies to whether it's gas, whether it's agriculture or any manufacturing input. So imagine a cocoa price. Imagine Nigeria wants to start manufacturing chocolate, byproduct from cocoa. If cocoa price goes up, that factory, does it get cocoa based on international price, or should there be a local price, that should be set for that factory? And so these are, I think, bigger issues as to how do you support domestic production without necessarily undermining some of the incentives to produce in the first place. So that's one big issue. But to answer your question, we're still exposed to global crude oil price, whether it's through the Dangote imports that we do.
Yeah, I want to share a slide with you. I'm going to put it on Twitter. So this is just a commentary on what you're talking about with Nigeria, where we have we're exporting the raw materials, and then we're importing, should we say, the finished goods. Again, we've reversed it in crude oil, where we're exporting crude and we're importing crude.
No, Kalu, sorry, let me make a point that right now Nigeria imports crude oil. Yeah. So we're exporting crude oil and we're also importing crude oil, not refined product, crude oil.
Yeah.
And the numbers are increasing and it's becoming scary because if you look at in 2025, the whole of 2025, that's the first year that we started importing crude into this country.
Yeah.
8.5% of our total import was crude oil. So you can imagine how we're now even becoming the vulnerability channels are even increasing. We don't import crude before because we produce their oil fields lying shallow, in many parts of the country. But now we're now importing crude. So that's a problem, for the country.
Yeah, again, like I said, if you look at the last tweet I just shared, you'll see the figures there, Nigerian oil imports. I picked this one on purpose because it shows the PMS and the crude oil. Like if you look at the chart, you will see how our PMS imports have been falling, right? And then you then see crude oil pop up. So we might get to a place where our PMS imports crash because of Dangote refinery and all that. But our crude oil imports then go up, which is just amazing that we can even utter this sentence we can even utter this sentence amazing that Nigeria will import crude oil, but will not import PMS. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's sometimes for us. It's something. The economy is changing and the structure is changing. So too are all of the things that we never used to experience before. Some of the things are happening, and so that's why I think a lot needs to go into really understanding what's the impact of this refinery. Whether it's from an input point of view, whether it's from a supplier point of view, whether it's from the macroeconomic implications, the industry implications. I don't think we've done, especially from a government side, I don't think the government has done much efforts, have done much in terms of really, doing a proper diagnostics of how this refinery will disrupt, whether it's production, sales, consumption, and all of those things. And then coming up with whether it's something to mitigate any negative impact of it. Because what we're seeing now, like you said, the numbers are scary. 5.7 trillion naira was what we spent importing crude oil.
Wow.
I heard that. I heard also that there are some blends of crude that is coming, that we don't produce or we don't have, so they mix it with other products just to get a desired output that they want. I'm not an energy expert, but I hear that some of those we don't produce in Nigeria. But again, I think part of it also has to do with domestic issues where some of the crude has been blocked off for the next couple of years. And it just feels like, look, the best way to just address this and issues of oil theft, pipeline and so many other domestic issues that I think we can solve. But on a nutshell, to more detail.
So I mean, it's just to emphasize what really happened in the country of Nigeria, that we have NNPC 4 refineries not working. We have Dangote working, but then Dangote has to import oil from the United States of America, refine and sell locally. Right now, I think it's cheaper than importing PMS because of what's happening in the world. Maybe Dangote now has an edge because it's importing crude. He can refine the crude, get byproducts, and even locally subsidize in his own refinery. But if you import PMS, there's no subsidy for you. I mean, internally, because you are bringing that product and you are selling that product. Dangote can bring in crude oil, make aviation fuel, sell aviation fuel back to the Americans, and subsidize the PMS is selling. So long term, there's no imports are not going to survive in Nigeria. But it's just amazing that the largest exporter of crude oil in Africa is now becoming one of the largest importers of crude oil from the same country that we built Nigeria exporting crude to the Americans. Now we're importing crude from them. It's amazing. And we just take it as, well, it's normal. We are importing crude. It's amazing. But let me ask you a question, sir. Do you think we should have a subsidy on PMS, even if it's a short-term subsidy to cushion the effect? You just said consumption has crashed from 72 to 40. This 40%, if you take it in real terms, sir, what it means is that for someone's wallet, he used to have, let's just use rough figures. He used to earn 100 Naira. He would spend 70 Naira. Today, he earns 100 Naira. He only has 40 Naira to spend. In that 40 Naira today, he has to now buy petrol at this price coming from the Hormuz. Should there be a short-term subsidy until this Iran war is over?
So I think whatever the solution is, especially given that pricing where most of our this input of crude now, input of the refinery, it's priced, using global prices. Whatever the solution is, it will bring us back to that conversation of subsidy or no subsidy. Because at the end of the day, somebody will have to bear the cost, right? You just said like the consumers now are the ones bearing the cost, you and I. And by the way, I don't work for the government. NESG is not a government-related institution. So some people would think Nigerian Economic Summit Group that we don't work for the government. We're strictly funded by the private sector. So at the end of the day, somebody will have to bear the cost, whether it's the consumers, the producers, whether it's Dangote, the input suppliers, as the guys producing the crude, or the government. One of these or all of these agents, one of them or some of them will have to bear the cost. And one thing I always try to avoid, especially with issues like subsidies, trying to be at the two end of the extreme, where one would argue that, well, let the market determine whatever you get your crude from, it doesn't matter. International price doesn't matter. Sell it. If people can buy it, they buy it. That's one extreme.
Mm.
And the other extreme is the permanent, cheap domestic pricing that, no, we need a separate price for local crude. Maybe we should try to support consumers. Consumers should not bear this cost, so let's have something introduced. But I think there has to be some middle ground, and so yes, I would argue for something close to a differentiated pricing, such that we can design it very, very carefully and not necessarily a blanket subsidy, but at the same time, not a permanent discount, and not anything that would look like a price control. So I think it's just for us to sit and look for a better framework and say, look, how do we do this in a strategic way such that we would select who gets what? If it's say the domestic producers of crude, for instance, how do we create a benchmark locally for crude and say if it gets above a certain level, maybe $70, $80, $90 or $100, that's when government will then step in and say, okay, because this product is, I think petrol, we underestimate the importance of petrol in Nigeria. I think it's a nationally sensitive product that it fits into everything, which is why when they were arguing for outright subsidy removal, some of these international institutions, I was always in the room challenging them that they said if government removes subsidy, that inflation will just go up by 1% and later it will come back. I was always the lone voice saying, you guys are not, mapping how useful or important petrol is to the Nigerian economy. But unfortunately, their advice was taken, or at least the government moved in their direction, and we saw the impact on inflation. It was not just a one-off. So I think for products that are that nationally sensitive, whether the differentiated pricing or whether you call it subsidy will have to come at the producer's point of view, or at the guys that sell the crude, or at the guys that refine the crude. It's just something that Nigeria would have to discuss, and I would not rule it out 100%. I think it's something worth discussing, because otherwise it's the citizens that will continue paying for the cost. And in an era where your consumption is declining, I'm sorry, there's no way we can build any resilience or strong domestic economy when people don't have the purchasing power.
Fantastic. So I have one last question for you now. But before we go to Naira, I want to take questions and we'll go to Naira on its own specifically. I have a guy that wants to ask a question. He's been waiting patiently. Let me ask this question. But just on the last one, on this PMS subsidy issue, the government is making extraordinary profit. Their budget was 65. Now oil is approaching 120. So they are making 100% on what they targeted. So should they not take 25%, even if they say they're going to do subsidy, or they're going to give BRT, or if you have a combi bus, they will give you money if you pay your license? Can they not do something? They are making 100% from $65. Oil today is about 110, 120. 100% return is going to the government. What are they giving back to the taxpayers that own the crude oil in the first place? Again, I'm putting you on the spot. You're not working for the government, but again, these are the questions we're hearing. What are Nigerians going to, where is the safety net on making 100% return from the government? So again, I'm not putting you on the spot, but just wondering.
Yeah, I know. I would say the 100% is a bit, is a simplistic way to look at it, because remember, at the start of the year, crude oil was around $62 per barrel. So when you do average, the benchmark is an average for the year. So because it's 110%, for the last couple of days or weeks, does not mean the average for the year is $110 per barrel, right? So average, like I said earlier, average from January to March 17th is somewhere around $76 per barrel. So it's not 100%. 100% gain is just for one day, right? Remember, oil was trading below the benchmark, for the early part of the year. So that's a lot. So you would have to net that out. I just thought to make that clarity. But regardless of whether oil is increasing or not, I think the second part of that comment is extremely important. That just looking at the data alone, you don't even need oil price or whatever. Just look at the data where your household consumption is decimated. People need support. And the support has to be, because let the markets, you are leading leaning towards this market ideology of let everything determine the price. Yeah, it is good in to be left out of that process. So yeah, I support when I've said this many times, when Brazil was planning their subsidy removal in the early 2000s, in the mid 2000s, right? When they were thinking of removing subsidy, in fact, that idea or that thought led to one of the world's largest social programs, that we've ever seen. That's the Bolsa Familia or something, where they were, providing support to the vulnerable people that would not impact. In fact, people were getting gas vouchers, monthly, where if you know this product would affect this, you'll be affected. You get monthly support, gas vouchers. Other countries would implement bus vouchers, social supports, pensions, insurance, all of those. There's so many options that we have, that I think we've not necessarily explored, and it's really sad. So I support that argument 100%, that that's one of the key areas that we should be looking towards.
Just to make the point again before we look at it again. In Brazil, they took 100% of oil royalties and allocated it to health and education from their salt oil mines. 100% of royalties, they took it to health and education in Brazil. Brazil has the same population as Nigeria, almost the same population as Nigeria. There's almost the same demographics. They did that in Brazil, and they didn't do it because of the law. Let's not go there, but they did it, so it's possible to do it. Let's get OLG Caleb. He's been waiting. After this, we're going to go back and talk Naira. OLG, thanks for waiting. You have a question for Dr. Wilson?
Yes, I do. So I'll just quickly go straight to my question. Now, it has been established that we are running at a 300,000 barrels per day loss. And who is actually bearing that loss? Is it the Nigerian government or the companies extracting this oil?
Good question.
Because to me, the let's say 1.4 million we are extracting today, how many percent of that actually goes to the government? How many percent of that goes to the federation account? Because the joint ventures are actually going to get a percent, the production sharing contracts too. After all those deductions, how many actually goes to the federation account? And if you also account for the dollar for crude loans, we actually I think that should be around 300k barrels per day. So if you put all that into consideration, are we actually getting any significant gain from this hike in oil prices, or we are just getting a very big net negative because it doesn't add up?
Well, half bread is better than none. Doc, what's your take?
Precisely. I was just going to say that, at least oil prices are high. So that is one thing that, regardless of, at least the production structure has not changed. It's still the same way we've, sold crude into the future. A part of that is also going to the IOCs and the like. So I wouldn't say that because oil prices are high, so you will still get more revenue from that increase in oil price. But you asked a very important question as to who is bearing the cost, especially when it comes to output differentials, right? So let's assume that oil price, remains the same, or we meet our budget benchmark and we are left with that output differential. At the end of the day, it's the average Nigerian that bears that cost. And, the reason why I say this is because one of the things that always happened with Nigeria's budget, and not just budget now, when you look at the actuals for each year, there's always a huge gap between what the revenue we plan to get and the revenue that we eventually got. So if our budget was, say, 35 trillion revenue, we plan to get 35 trillion revenue. There's always a shortfall. We almost always never meet that revenue target. And what does that mean? It means that the government will borrow. So our deficit is always higher than the projected deficit. So if we had planned to borrow 10, 15 trillion, we always borrow more than that. And as you know, the government takes debt servicing costs seriously. So we always pay back, as at when due. And so it just means, and you can look at high interest rates at the moment. Interest rates are really high, around 18%, 1 year treasury bill, 18, 17%. That's a huge borrowing cost. So it just means what's left for the government to spend if the majority of our expenditure has gone to servicing debt, or a significant part of that, our expenditure has gone to servicing debt. Why? Because we are borrowing. Why are we borrowing? Because we are not meeting our production target. Why? And again, the budget is predicated on your expenditure side, is predicated on your revenue side, because you have a deficit gap that you need to fill. So at the end of the day, it is the average Nigerian, because less money is then allocated to capital projects, to other critical infrastructure needs that the economy that should have been done but then much of that goes to servicing debt. And we're in that cycle where we just keep borrowing back, borrowing service. And so it comes back again to the question of, how do we plan for the future in a way that development objectives are met and the average Nigerians are carried along? I think that's one big question that, hopefully the government will continue to think about and address. Otherwise, we'll just keep being in this circle of debt circle where we're just borrowing and then nothing much really is happening.
I like the point he's making, sir. Once January starts, the costs start in January, but revenues don't come in January. We have a deficit that is based on 6.7 and 1.7. So if we don't make the 1.7, sir, again, we're already building up the deficit before we even go to the debt. The point is, if we don't drill at 1.7 and sell at 65, we are growing the already huge deficit. So his question is really valid. I mean, we are the ones paying for the deficit by the government borrowing. And borrowing is the same as a tax increase. So every time they borrow, it's like they're increasing taxes on Nigerians. This year, sir, we're borrowing 2 trillion a month. 2 trillion. This is if we sell 65 at 1.8 million barrels a day, we will still borrow 2 trillion a month. So now that we're not even making the 1.7, that 2 trillion is going to be maybe 2.1 or something. It's a crazy number to put your mind around. 2 trillion a month. 10 years ago, the budget was like maybe 3 trillion. And that's what we're borrowing, not spending, borrowing every single month. Crazy. Thanks for the question, Caleb. Let's get Ifrex, then we'll come to Ken, and then we'll come back to Wilson and talk about the Naira value. Ifrex, go ahead.
Good evening.
Good evening, sir. Ifrex, I can't hear you if you're speaking.
Mr. Wilson, hello, can you hear me?
I can now, yes.
Okay. I said I came a little bit late, but nevertheless, I joined the conversation. I've heard what Mr. Wilson is saying, and I've gone through his profile, his economics PhD. So my question is to you is simple, and it goes like this. I just heard you say that Nigeria now is becoming one of the major importer of crude oil in West Africa, as attend to when we used to be the major exporter because of Dangote refinery. Am I right? So,
no, I didn't say major importer of crude oil. I just said Nigeria has import. I said we spend 5.7 trillion importing crude, and it's 8.5% of our total imports. That crude oil is significantly increasing, and it's something we should look into. So I don't know what other West African countries import. For now, I don't have the data, but I know that we import crude oil and it's increasing.
Okay, like I was basically talking about crude oil, not any other thing like whatsoever. So my question is just like, okay, because of Dangote refinery, that's why our import has gone up. Am I right?
Effects, what's the question, if you don't mind? Just go ahead and ask the question.
Okay, so now the question is, since Dangote, let's say the federal government has not given Dangote the required quantity amount of crude oil needed to supply to turn into fuel and then supply it to Nigerians. So will there be any problem if the federal government now say, okay, we will supply Dangote crude oil until it meets its target? Will there be any effect on the economy, instead of Dangote going outside to import the crude oil and refine it here and then sell it to us, whereas we have this thing that you are going outside to import? If the federal government answers, okay, we are going to supply you, Dangote, your required quantity and let it meet your target before we then go outside and sell it to other people that are buying the crude oil from us, will there be any effect?
So that's a good question. So I mean, if I hear him, he's asking, is it if Mr. Wilson saying if Dangote gets crude oil, will it be positive? I think I'm focusing on if for a reason.
Yeah.
No, of course, it will be positive. I think the ideal case would be if he can get everything from Nigeria. That would be the perfect scenario.
Mm-hmm.
But again, if it's something we can't produce, because I know there are different variants of crude as well, and some refineries are built for specific purpose. So that's also something to consider. But if it's something that we can produce, we have it locally in Nigeria, then why not? I think the benefit will be, in fact, the benefit of the refinery will be significantly larger than it is now if that happens. Because again, one of the key questions that then has come up is that it's not only about where you get, it's not only about the input itself, where you get it matters. At what price you get that input, that's the crude oil now into the refinery, also matters. You can imagine the transport cost from shipping crude from US to Nigeria. If Nigeria was really efficient, it would have been much easier to get that crude from, say, the Niger Delta region to Lagos, where the refinery is. So I think there are so many advantages that would happen across the entire value chain if Nigeria can supply crude. But again, it's a big if.
Yeah, but
so why can't we?
Is there any oil to even give Dangote? So I think that's the question. I don't think there's any spare oil to give Dangote refiners from Nigeria. I don't think there's any.
Yeah, so like we said earlier, some of that has been already, ring fenced, has been tied already. If you follow the conversations with NMPC over the years, the other point I made earlier also was, speaking to some of the indigenous, one of the major indigenous player, and he was basically saying, look, there's not enough investment in that space to be able to guarantee significant production or even to meet our budget benchmark. There's not enough investment into the sector. So those are, I think, so many legacy issues that we must, start looking at to be able to achieve that output. That would in a way benefit us in terms of exports, but at the same time benefit us in terms of supplying to the refinery.
There's none. I think
a game of numbers.
Yeah, we don't have any. We don't have a spec. Thank you. Let's go to. I think you dropped off. Let's get Osasu. Osasu is here. I think we lost Ken. Osasu. Go ahead and ask your question.
Hi, Kalu. How are you?
I'm doing very well, sir. How you been?
I've been very busy. Very busy.
I can imagine. Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah.
I'm just curious. I mean, just a bit of background before I ask my questions. When Dangote was building the refinery, about late 2016. I actually went there and I saw him and had a conversation with him about what he was doing. And I actually hope to have another conversation with him before the end of next month, which will make it actually just about 10 years, or no, almost 10 years that I've actually seen him since then. So it should be an interesting conversation.
I agree.
But the questions I really want to ask is, one, what is Nigeria's production capacity at the moment? How much is actually available for domestic use? And because as far as I know, as I've just been hearing, and as I know I've heard before, I know that Dangote has been importing a lot of his crude from the US. So he brings it in, he refines it, and he has always had a market internationally anyway. So even if Nigeria is not doing much for him, he will be fine. And if any of you read the stories from Bloomberg over the last couple of days, you can see that the situation in the Middle East is actually going to make his refinery even more important in the African continent with regards to energy security now. Because for most African countries, Nigeria is probably going to be, if you're talking of countries on the West Coast, if you're talking of even in Central Africa, even South Africa, it's far nearer to ship from Lagos than it would be from Europe or from the Middle East.
And no Hormuz.
I beg your pardon?
And there's no Hormuz. Yeah.
Yes, no Hormuz. So the question is, what is our production capacity at the moment? How much is even being given to him, if any? And I mean, as somebody just pointed out earlier, there's been a terrible underinvestment in Nigeria's petroleum industry. So we haven't been able to really rack up our production in recent years. So how do we even take advantage of the hike in price? How do we do this? So I'm really interested. I'm actually wanting to learn a lot more today than, make comments, because the oil industry, as Dangote himself said, is a mafia. It's a strange one.
And Doctor can maybe give more context. So what is our total output? We're at 1.438 million barrels per day. This is at March the 18th. March the 18th, we're at 1.4. The budget is about 1.8, so we're underperforming the budget. How much does of 13 needed crude cargoes from NNPC? So I don't know how much is in a cargo, but it's getting only 5 out of 13 that
so less than half of what he needs.
Less than half. Whatever is what makes up that cargo, he's getting less than half of that from the NNPC. Yep. And this is as at March 2026. So those two give you a picture. You don't have to drill down. You can see that number one, oil output is down. Number two, NNPC is not giving him any oil, which means he then has to go out and get that oil from the United States. When Dr. Wilson was talking earlier about oil imports are going up, I think he says we're now about 5.7 trillion, 8.5% of import is crude oil and rising. And remember, we can't just, even if we drill more, we have to pay our debt. We've used this oil as collateral to borrow money.
Yes.
So we sold oil in the future and got oil. So I got $9. Where those dollars went to, they went to fix the Port Harcourt refinery. So let me lay it down to you again so you get more angry. Nigeria sold crude oil that it had not yet drilled, got the money in advance, then took that money it got in advance to go and fix its refinery. Fast forward to today, the refinery is not fixed, money has been spent, oil that is being drilled today is being used to pay down that debt. We have no oil, we have no refinery, there is no one in jail. I'll leave it that way.
This is Nigeria. Why is anybody surprised by that?
Yeah, but
it's a country that has no consequences for anything.
But even by Nigerian standards, that billions of dollars were borrowed using the crude oil reserves of the country. We got the dollars. We tied up the crude oil. We went to fix refineries, turned the refineries to a blending plant, then went and harassed Nigerians that said it's not working. We gaslighted them. Literally, we gaslighted them. We put a gas pilot light and says, if you see a gas pilot light, the refinery is working. The new NNPC chairman has come and said the NNPC refineries are not working. They want to sell them as scrap. So you want to ask, even for Nigerian standards, where did the billions go to? And that's why we're in this problem. Imagine if those refineries
You forgot to add, we gave timelines that we gave a deadline that it will work at a certain date.
Yeah. I mean, it's even for our standards, you know how we are, where we are, we are a bit tribal. We run to our tents when there's an issue. Today, everybody in Nigeria is buying expensive PMS. Today, everybody, whether you are an alphabet or you are a tribal warlord, you are buying the same expensive PMS. Nobody's in jail. We've jailed people for fuel subsidy before in Nigeria. We jailed a sitting house member, didn't we? In Nigeria, a sitting house member was jailed. But today, nothing is happening. Nothing is happening. So again, let's go back to the subsidy question. All that, we'll lose track. But also, I think you see the point.
Kalu, if you remember, I don't know if you listened to what General Obasanjo said about this matter before. Had it been that he talked about how he wanted Shell to take over the refineries in Nigeria. He called the CEO of Shell and they discussed and they told him, Mr. President, first of all, we are more in the upstream than downstream. And two, the size of your refineries are too small. And third, the refineries are in such a terrible state that it doesn't even make sense for them to take them over. And that was the reason Obasanjo wanted to sell them off. And he was going to sell them off. And Dangote was actually going to be one of those that were going to buy them.
And Otedola. Dangote and Otedola.
At that time. And then what did Buhari do? What did Yar'Adua do as soon as he came in? He reversed it because some people end on power. Kalu, was it 10 billion?
At least they can point to 10 gas power plants working today. No matter what they spent, they can show you that we have Geregu, we have this, we have that. They can point you to 10 power plants that are working today. If not for those gas power plants tonight, today we'll have no power. And on corruption, right? If you can point to the project, Nigeria will give you a soft landing. In this instance, right, there is no refinery, there is no money. The oil has gone, and there is no refinery. When
is the last time we actually had a proper minister for petroleum in Nigeria?
Desani, wasn't not Desani? Okay. That answers your question.
Okay. So for the last 26 years, the president of the country is the minister of petroleum.
Correct.
That's how can you run an industry like
there's nothing wrong with that. In real life, he's not the minister of petroleum. He has someone that's doing the real work. But I think there's something in the law that says the minister, why they are trying to avoid with this minister is that if you look at the case in the ministry of, is it which one does dams? Where the Obasanjo, let me give you the story for those that don't know. Nigeria was going to build a dam, and a minister came to the Federal Executive Council and presented a letter from a company called Sunrise to build a dam for Nigeria. The president at the meeting at the Federal Executive Council told the minister, no, we are not going to give this contract to Sunrise. At the FEC meeting, you know what the minister did? The minister went and issued the contract to the guy, and then he resigned because that was the end of Obasanjo's tenure. Those are very, very end. So the minister issued the contract after he was told he could not. Fast forward, whenever you want to build that dam, that guy will go and sue you and say he has the ministerial paper to build the dam. I think the last president went to court, and then the court says, was the minister, according to the laws of Nigeria, can the minister issue a contract? And they said, yes, according to the laws of Nigeria, a minister can issue a contract, even if the FEC says no. Based on that ruling, they held that the Sunrise guys have the right to either build the dam or be compensated. That's why we haven't built that Mambila Dam till today. So going forward, they all learned, which meant that if a minister of crude oil or petroleum issues a contract, the president cannot cancel that contract. That's why you see them all becoming ministers of petroleum. They're trying to avoid the Mambila issue. It doesn't make any sense, but that's why they're doing it. Just change the law, they won't, but they want to do this wrong about. But let's come back to Doc. Osasu has lots of questions. I'm giving him the data. Do you have any follow-up on this, sir? Dr. Wilson?
Yes, Carlo, I think you've answered the question. Just to say that I've seen several estimates that put Nigeria's production capacity at 2.2 to 2.5 or 2.6 million barrels per day. And I know that for a fact that we've produced in this country 2.59 million barrels per day in 2006. So if you look at past data, I mean, we used to do 2.3, 2.4
casually. We should do 2.3
in the mid 2000s. So it's really sad that we've just been on a decline, all the way to, in fact, we even got to 1.1 million barrels just a couple of years ago. And it gets me when sometimes the current status, it just feels like a new normal and everybody seems to be okay with it. And we just, same with inflation, right? It gets to 20%, 21, 20, the past, you would see that we've had inflation at 6% before. Our reserves has been beyond $50 billion before, but so I think we just need to get out of that psychic that, especially when they keep saying we're doing well on some of the numbers, that doing well is relative to the fact that it's almost like you dug a well, jumped inside, and you are coming out of the well and you're celebrating. Yes, perhaps maybe one or two reasons to do so, but it's not where you were before. And our best days cannot be in the past, and so that's why sometimes you always look forward and say, look, we can do better, whether it's in terms of oil production, exports, non-oil exports, so many areas of our economy, whether it's growth. I mean, we're talking about agricultural growth is somewhere around 2 to 3%, right? Yeah. Even GDP growth, 7%, and the likes. But now we would have 3.1, 3.2, and everyone is happy or excited. So I think we just need to do better, and we just need to know that we've not reached our peak yet, and we can make all of these work.
Yeah, if you notice, they always say in the last 8 years, Nigeria they always refer to it's a base effect, because they are correct. If you say the last 8 years, yes, Nigeria has done well, but the last 8 years were atrocious. Let me give you a data point, sir. The worst GDP growth in Nigeria from about the year 2000 till 2015, the worst GDP growth rate. From this administration has not met the worst GDP growth rate we had from the year 2000 till the year 2015. We haven't hit the worst. I don't know if you understand what I'm saying. The worst GDP that Obasanjo, Yaradua, Goodluck delivered. This administration has not hit it. And when I mean this administration, I'm talking about from Buhari till Tinubu. They haven't hit the worst that Goodluck, Yaradua, and Obasanjo did. When you look at it that way, you understand that we are in some serious trouble. It's not a question of we're in trouble, and we have to grow the economy. Not all this, like I said, this sidebar we're doing, one here, two here, go to see the king here. We have to really grow the economy.
Here's the problem. Now they are in election mode.
Also,
can you hear hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, I was just saying that we know how Nigeria works. In a 4-year administration, there's some semblance of government for the first 2 years, and then the third year is all about elections, and then the fourth year is the election year. Now, these guys are not even concerned about development or even doing the basic things. All they care about now is regaining power. So from now till February, I don't know. From now till middle of next year, I really don't know what is going to happen in the country.
And Doc, just to make this point, Doc, I think this 2026 budget is the last quote unquote real, air quotes, real budget we're going to have. The budget next year, I don't care what they put in that budget. It's going to go towards politics. I don't care if they say they're going to build a road to my village. They are going to use that budget for politics. So this 2026 budget has the 2024, 2025 capital budget. This 2026 budget. We are already in March. I don't think we have done the 2024 because the minister was saying that they're going to finish 2025 this quarter. So we've not even started 2026 budget. We've not started. Remember that we passed the tax reform. Have we started that tax reform? I don't see anything. So there's a lot going on that if you are blissfully unaware, you are actually a lucky guy. If you are blissfully unaware, because it won't worry you the way it worries folks that know what's going on. 2025 budget is 3 budgets in one. And we haven't even started the 2024. Okay, I think we've done the 2024. We're going to start 2025 capital budget in the next 9 months. And Doc, again, to help you out, I just posted the crude oil returns for Nigeria from the year 1999 till the year 2022. You'll see Nigeria was doing about, in 2006, 2.5 million barrels. If you can go back in time, 2024, 2025 was when we had people leaving America and UK to come back to Nigeria and work. 2024, 2025, 2026, all the way to 2014, people were leaving their jobs abroad to come to Nigeria and work. That was when Nigeria was in the JP Morgan Emerging Market Bond Index. We were there because we had so much oil, we had so much FDI. Again, it's not just oil. The FDI in 2009 was nearly 8 billion. The lowest FDI, if you look at 2014, was about 4 billion. FDI, I'm not talking of FP, which is the portfolio flows that came from JP Morgan. I'm talking about Americans, UK, Chinese bringing money to Nigeria to invest. The lowest we got in 2014 from all these years was 4 billion. Some years 7, some years 8. Now we are celebrating. I saw the Minister of Solid Minerals saying we've attracted 2.5 billion in 3 years. That same figure, Buhari attracted it in 1 year, 2.6 billion. Buhari got it in 1 year, 2020. That's what we're celebrating, that in 3 years we have gotten. It is what it is. All right, guys, it is what it is. So, Doc, let me take you back to the Naira, because we have to talk really about the Naira. That's what Nigerians really are. The Nigerians have this psychological attachment to a strong Naira. Looking at the Hormuz, looking at the oil output, what's your takes on how we should view the Naira as a manufacturer, first of all, and as a consumer, next of all? What's your take, sir?
Well, I think there are two sides of a coin. One is if you, as you know, a weaker currency is a subsidy for export. I mean, automatically it is. The more your currency loses value, the more the Naira, let me put it in simple terms, the more the Naira moves from, say, 1.3 to 1.4 to 1.5 to 1.6, all the way moving close to 2,000. It encourages exporters because what it means is your product becomes relatively cheaper, just by the exchange rate alone, just not even considering the cost of production now. So, so that's why one of the things you've also seen with the numbers, in addition to, again, back to this refinery, the Dangote refinery, is that oil products exports has increased also, significantly to around 30% of our total export. That's not crude, if you take out crude and leave out all the other oil-related products, that share is increasing significantly. Whether it's urea export and all the other byproducts from crude. So that's also something good and worth mentioning. If you then look at the data, you would also see non-oil export is also increasing, and partly due to the fact that the currency, the weaker currency, sort of like incentivizes export. So there's some gains, I would say, but maybe not as much as we expect. But on the flip side, and as you know, Nigeria is more of an importing country. And I've written a piece. In fact, my entire work was on how our manufacturing industry is also very import dependent, not just the economy now, but that particular industry. And if one of the strongest parts of an economy, the manufacturing is what has lifted people out of poverty in other countries, built wealth for so many people. So it's always considered as one of the core productive base of an economy. If that part also is heavily import dependent, then it means that there's a problem. So in terms of how the central bank manages all of this, what part should the CBN go? Should it allow the Naira to lose its value more, to depreciate, and then ensure that exports become more competitive? Or should it allow the Naira to appreciate? I think, which also affects import, but at the same time, imports become cheaper. I think if I were in the shoes, what I would do is to find a stable ground for the Naira, which is why, again, when I saw that, at some point the currency was appreciating significantly, coming towards 1,300, I thought, well, I would rather keep it at a stable band and focus on growing the reserves. I think that is what is more beneficial. Right now, everybody says, or many people say, that the Naira is stable, but is it really stable? I think that's one question we need to ask. Because yes, the Naira is appreciating, right? Coming from 1.5 all the way close to 1.3, right? But it's still not stable. You wake up tomorrow, it's 1.350. You wake up next tomorrow, it's 1.380. You wake up the other day, it's 1.320. That's not stability. So it's appreciating, but at the same time, there's some level of volatility we're seeing. And that's
Doctor,
because...
just to ask you, if there is no support from the central bank, what would happen to the Nigerian currency?
So I will find it hard to answer that question, because every majority of central banks support their economy, their currency. I don't think it's very hard for you to say a central bank that leaves their currency, for just say demand and supply. There has to be that sort of intervention that happens regularly, in the market. Maybe I think the problem we had during the last admin is that the size of intervention at some point was even so big and so large that it was even distorting the market fundamentals. So when we look at exchange rates, is not that the central bank should not intervene, but what's the size of that intervention, right? And how?
That was what I meant, Doctor. Because obviously, yes, the as you rightly pointed out, the purpose of a bank is to ensure that there is a stable currency, so that there is no disruption to the economy. But if they are doing it in a way that artificially props up the value of the Naira, then it means that it has to be spending considerable sums to support it. And that on its own is also harmful to the economy, no?
Yeah, but I've also seen the reverse, where the central bank in the last, I think in last month, was it last month? Yeah, the central bank actually went into the Naira, into the exchange rate market to purchase Naira. I think that's the first time it's happened in a long time, to purchase dollars from the market. So rather than selling dollars to the market, so the central bank, the article, by so many international platforms, said that the central bank actually purchased dollar from the market because the Naira was appreciating too fast. right? So it's not a one-way thing. I think what central banks do is to try to ensure that to smoothen out the volatility and reduce it to the barest minimum. But again, my contention is that, and where I think we need to do a lot more work, and the central bank needs to do a lot more work, is how do you keep the currency within a certain band? If you remember during Sanusi era, when the Naira stayed, Sanusi, when the Naira stayed at around 155 Naira to $1 for a long period, and there was a plus minus band that keeps the currency within that range, because it's easier for businesses to plan when you know that the currency would stay within a certain range than for you to wake up tomorrow it's 1.3, next tomorrow is 1.4, then it's back to 1.3. And I think that's where I see I think the central bank needs to do a lot more work to define that particular range. We've done it before, and it worked before. Define that particular narrow range and let the Naira trade within that range, and then that would then determine the size of your interventions over time, rather than this almost like very high volatility that we're seeing, especially in the last couple of months.
But Doc, how does this tie into the OMO argument? Because when you talked about the central bank of Nigeria was buying dollars, that was to prop dollars back up. I read the point was that the guys abroad that are buying Nigerian securities want a weak Naira. That's the attraction for them. So why would a guy leave America and buy Nigerian bonds that are paying him maybe 4% or 5% when he can get the same in America? Also, why would he change $100 and get 800 Naira when before he was getting 1,004? So I think that was what CBN was buying to protect the OMO trade, the OMO trade that foreigners buy, the bonds that foreigners buy, because they were getting less bonds per dollar. But they were not doing it because they wanted, what's the word now? They wanted you and I in Nigeria to have a strong Naira.
So Kalu, that's the problem. And at what cost?
Yeah, which is what
the economy is not built for the guy in America only, right? There are people who are here domestically who export their products. There are also people who import, products into the country.
Yeah.
And so that's where I think that balance has to be made. And I was speaking somewhere recently, and I tried to contextualize what the economy is going through now, that we're seeing all of the reforms that the government has made leading to significant costs that if we must move forward, those costs has to be they have to be reduced. And one of that costs that I mentioned recently, I think I shared the post on my LinkedIn, is the fact that we're paying a high price, interest rate at significant 26.5% MPR, all in the name to attract foreign investors or for FPIs into the country. But the cost is, what's the interest rate if you also want to borrow or get a loan from a bank? It's over 30%. In fact, when I was doing a presentation to a board, and these guys do credits, they offer credit to businesses. They said interest rate they offer is 60%, 55%, because they're doing 5% per month. So you can imagine you borrowing money at 60%. That's I don't know which business or which small business can.
But again, so
it comes to all of these comes at a cost that we have to be careful and manage those costs. Otherwise, to be honest, everything will be fragile in my view.
But again, if you look at the CBN's numbers, we have about 50 billion in reserves, and I think the net reserves are about 34 billion. So what if you look at the balance sheet, what I think Nigeria is doing is they are doing foreign portfolio investments. The CBN is borrowing money, paying very expensive rates in dollars to maintain a foreign reserve. And that foreign reserve is then used to maintain the strength of the Naira, allow them to intervene. Because once you are a trader and you see CBN has 50 billion, you are a bit hesitant to short the Naira. But that 50 billion, in that 50 billion is Euro bonds, is the foreign portfolio investment. Nigeria is not attracting any investments anyways. We are bringing money through foreign portfolio investments. These are very expensive. So there's stability. It's like driving a Rolls Royce to go and buy Gala and pure water. That's what Nigeria is doing. We're with very expensive foreign reserves to maintain a Naira that is being weakened by expectation of being weak, not by the fact that it actually is weak. I don't personally think Naira should be as high as 1415. But I think that the government has not shown enough stability or enough economic prudence. Yeah, the people don't trust them. It's a trust thing because they think if they get more money, they will spend it. So look, if you look at the SEC numbers, if you take money markets away, money markets are 60% of where Nigerians invest, according to collective investment schemes. The next investment is dollars. I was shocked. Nigerians hold more dollars than federal government bonds, than Nigerian equities on a collective scheme basis. So the average Nigerian guy will, yes, put money in money market. The next place is putting money is for his dollar. This is not dumb account. So this is just the investment because of the trust. Even the CBN is now issuing dollar bonds in Nigeria because there's lots of dollars in Nigeria, but there's no money in CBN because Nigerians prefer the dollar. This holding dollar thing is backed up by data. So I think if there's trust in the economic managers, if they trust the government that this government is going to spend well, people will stop holding dollar. Why do you want to hold dollar that doesn't pay you any interest in your DOM account? People will say, okay, I'm going to go buy Naira. People are saying, but the data is not showing us that. More Nigerians are holding dollar than equities, than infrastructure funds, than bonds on a collective investment scheme. That's why I think it's going on sale again.
Yeah, and Kalu, I think you made a point, and it speaks to the fact that, look, CBN cannot do this alone, right? There has to be that collective. Those fiscal trade authorities are very key in terms of driving or ensuring that whatever stability in some of these macro indicators are sustainable, even the reserves, right? I mentioned earlier that growth has been external, led. When I showed the numbers that net exports contribute significantly to growth versus a very weak domestic demand, and so one other important part of the argument is that we must be able to grow our domestic investment, and that's where jobs will come from. That's where you can raise that household consumption numbers that is declining. That's why when we start talking about things like investing in infrastructure, selecting specific industries that you can boost, to create jobs and expand, then it becomes beyond just a monetary policy issue. We're now talking about industrial policy, trade policy coming together to, in a way, support the growth of local businesses, but at the same time, create better jobs for Nigerians. So I don't think we're having that jobs conversation, enough. Everyone is looking at, macro numbers look good, or look better than they were, in the past couple of years. And so the next level of growth or the next phase of growth has to be domestically induced, such that you're reducing all of those costs, but at the same time, supporting domestic firms so that Nigerians can wake up. The average graduate can look for a job and get a reasonable paying job, not what we're seeing where everyone is moving almost to the informal economy, which now accounts for 93% of our economy. Everybody is just hustling, basically.
Gotcha.
And we can't grow any economy sustainably with, that kind of model.
Doc, we're wind down mode now. Let's get a few guys to speak and also wind down the space. I've got Chief B, Ken, and OLG. I'll come back to you. Chief B, go ahead.
Hi, Mr. Kalu. Good day, I greet everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Good day, sir. Please go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. So I mean, this matter, honestly, it's a little bit troublesome. Because yes, like we're an oil producing nation, it should be a double-edged sword for us. We should be getting the windfall from the high oil price, while PMS, petroleum products, are supposed to be expensive because of the deregulation. But honestly, as governments around the world are doing, they're running to make sure that innocent people do not suffer as a result of this war. What are they doing? They're putting price caps. They're releasing, oil from their strategic reserves. Even Russia is getting some relief in terms of sanction. As a matter of fact, even Iran, as part of their crude, I think about 140 million barrels somewhere, is being allowed, to be put back into the market, just so that innocent people do not suffer as a result of this war. But what is the government doing? What is Nigerian government doing? That's the question that we need to ask. What are they doing exactly to make sure that people don't needlessly suffer? There's not a lot of time to talk. But honestly, NNPC is one of the biggest problems that we have in this country. And until we have a government that can really, truly shake down and open up NNPC to the whole world, this economy is not going to stabilize. We're just going to keep talking about all these paper while people are going through serious physical pains. Okay? I don't know how much time we have, but I mean, I just wanted to put that out there, that you're only going to see the pain on people. But when it comes to the windfall profit, you're only going to see that in paper. You will never see it come to the people. This is the challenge this government. Thank you very much. I just wanted to put that out there.
Dr. Wilson, he makes a good point. Should Nigeria go to Qatar or Saudi Arabia and just offer them NNPC and say, hey, buy NNPC? Why? Because we don't need the refineries. Come and invest. You have an outlet away from the Hormuz. It makes sense. You have an outlet away from the Hormuz. If you can build Nigeria was doing 2-point-something million barrels a day, which means the reserves are there. Build the reserves, sell the oil, give us 60%, like LLNG. Own the damn thing, pay us our 49%, bring your capacity in. I mean, we go to Qatar, you will get buyers. Should that be something that we should chase?
Kalu, to be honest, if we cannot manage our oil, what else can we manage?
Yeah.
So, to be honest, if you can't manage your own oil that has been the bedrock of the economy for decades, and you're outsourcing that, I mean, then we should all just travel and everybody should relocate abroad.
That means we can't manage anything now. That's what it means. Because LNG is not managed by Nigeria. That's why it's functional. But anything managed by Nigeria is not functional. That's what you're saying.
Kalu, it's even more difficult to industrialize, to manage your manufacturing, for your manufacturing to grow. All of the things you need to do, all of the institutional reforms, following, tracking firms. Like I said, most of what we know how to do at the very best is some of these macro-led initiatives. When it comes to the micro aspect of development, we're struggling because an industrial policy is micro. I'm using this as an example that if you want your manufacturing firms to grow, it is very micro. You are giving, in fact, in China, then they used to have, government officials that will be going to cities with their notebook and saying, look, how many products did you export today? Where did you export it to? If you meet this threshold, you will qualify for more export financing. They were doing that. Is our government structure to do that? I'm not talking about money for elections now. I'm saying money that would grow and develop companies. I wrote something about, sorry.
You good?
So sorry, I got. So I was saying that we are not structured to do those micro work, which is very, very important but difficult. So that's even the most difficult part of development in itself. Then the oil that we have, that we've mostly known, used to account for about 40% of our economy, significant share of government revenue. We cannot handle that well, really. Then why do we have government?
Wow.
So to me, it's I don't think I don't know. I'm not. maybe we should think more about reforming government itself or reforming government institutions than outsourcing our oil to do the Qataris. Do they have 5 heads? Do the Saudis have 10 heads?
Oh, wow.
No, so
we all know, Doctor, that the problem of Nigeria is the lack of political will to enthrone merit and professionalism in the management of our natural
resources. Then why can't we channel much of our advocacy to that? Because we have to fix, otherwise you would outsource the economy and we are still the ones that will complain that everything is being controlled by foreigners. So let's fix that. Let's fix that problem that we're having. Because it's not a problem in oil. It's a problem in steel. It's a problem in
everything, really.
Every aspect of our economy.
Anything with an N does not work. Nigerian Airways, NNPC, Ajaokuta, shipping lines, anything. What NFA?
Nigeria will work as long as the basis for the functionality of those industries are, where you are from.
We have to fix it.
Not about
I'm sorry. We have to fix that. I mean, right now there are like about 6 countries in the world that have sovereign wealth funds of over $1 trillion, right? 4 of them are from oil exports, except maybe China and Singapore. The others,
And how politically stable are they, Doctor? How politically stable are they?
Well, most of them are, of course, with Saudi. I'm not sure if you would say every 4 years type government. But my point is, yeah, hello?
No, go ahead.
Yeah, we're with you.
Yeah, so my point is, it's not kerosene that our oil is not kerosene now. Is it not crude oil? We have to fix governance in a way, and I think maybe that's where the conversation really, the political economy of who gets what, rent seeking. How do we ensure that? How can there be some alignment with a certain class such that they can? When I was speaking with, I was in a conference and somebody was giving a comment. I don't want to mention his name, and the person was saying, this is a very respected person, that it would have been difficult for anybody else to build that refinery that Dangote built in Nigeria. It would have been difficult for anybody else to do it because the risk involved was remember you said you saw him in 2016.
2016.
This was a time when subsidies were still on. And you are spending $20 billion. I don't know if you've seen the story of the land issue, how he got land, billions of, many. It's like the system.
No, that was a movie. That was a movie.
Yeah, that was. Doc, let me tell you a story with Dangote and the refinery. Nigeria, I think it was in 2013 or so, before Sasu was there, we had no forex to give anybody. There was no forex. So Emefiele was the CBN governor. Dangote, the refinery has sort of set to grind to a halt. And Dangote took Emefiele to the site and said, this is what I want to build. And this place is going to bring 20 billion every year back to Nigeria. You took Emefiele there. And that was when Emefiele said, okay, don't worry. It's on the papers. We will allocate you a special allocation for you to get dollars to build this refinery. That's how this refinery was built. He couldn't get dollars. That's Emefiele gave him. He was buying it, but back then you couldn't get dollars even if you had Naira. And Emefiele gave him the dollars that he started to at least build it before he could now go to the foreign guys and say, I have built stage 1, stage 2. I need to get funding from you. The point I'm coming back to is this: no CBN in the world exists only as a monetary body. Even in the US, the Fed does subsidy, but because they are more sophisticated, they do subsidy by buying bonds. They don't go and give you money to open up a Walmart. They will buy your bond. So I think Nigeria is a growing economy. We just can't say we're going to do pure CBN, monetary policy banking, and say we're not going to support growing sectors. There are many other sectors in Nigeria, many other things in Nigeria we need that we cannot do because you cannot grow industry or build a factory at 30% interest rate, which means in 4 years you pay back the bank your principal. It doesn't make any sense. So we have to have a fund, whether it's NSIA, whether it's the PFAs, whether it's the insurance on collected funds, where manufacturers of critical sectors can get dollars to go and set up industry. If we had no Dangote today, imagine where Nigeria would be. And even today, imagine where we would be today. So I don't know, Doc. In the end, we have to let's Ken. Ken keeps on. I'm going to add Ken and Araluchi's question. I'm trying to speak since the let's get Doc to answer, and then we'll sort of call it a day. Ken, go ahead, Ken.
Okay.
Araluchi, I'm trying to add. I'm not sure what's going on. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you so much, Kalu, and everyone
there you are.
Been here today. To be honest, it's quite sad. To be honest, it's quite sad. Joining your space every week.
Me?
No. I need to pour out a little bit because we keep coming here. We talk about these things. Been talking about it during Buhari's time, and here we are in another administration, and things are still getting bad. I mean, as in things are getting really bad. I mean, thank God for someone like Dangote. I don't know what the situation would have been in Nigeria, because even without Dangote, then we were out. But now, with what we have seen in the world, we are seeing the supply. The supply is there. It would be nothing close to what the NNPC been to Nigeria and to Nigerians. Okay, maybe it has been serving the federal government because it was set up half of Nigerians for the federal government, to fund the federal government. But of what use is it today to the Nigerian? Because right now we should be hearing news of the NNPC filling station selling lower than MRS because they have some strategic reserves somewhere that have been placed for and planned for this kind of period. Extraordinary work. And Nigerians will get succor. I mean, in Europe, more than 100% of the price you pay for PMS and diesel are taxes. So half of what you pay is actually the price of the product. The other half, and even more in some countries, are various taxes, environmental taxes. You can name them on that. Guess what they are doing at this period to help their people? They are relaxing those taxes, which you can say is a form of subsidy at this time. But you come to Nigeria, and you ask yourself, what exactly is the government doing to help the people right now? And the question is absolutely nothing. They are doing absolutely nothing. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, okay. So they are doing absolutely nothing. We have a government that is only interested in three things. This very government is interested in. Number one is revenue generation. And that is why they were so quick to remove fuel subsidy from the very first day, despite knowing the huge impact it would have on Nigerian SMEs and Nigerians in total, because of how dependent our economy is on this product we call PMS. People don't understand how it affects, how it links to everything. Now we are seeing food inflation coming back, taking back up again because of the fuel price going up. The second thing this government is interested in is international appeal. They don't care what happens in Nigeria. They just want to look good to the IMF so they can get loan. They want to look good to any government that is ready to welcome them and give them a banquet, and then they pay Nigerians to come on the street, and then they say Nigerians abroad love this administration. That's what they are interested in. Number two. Then number three, back home, there's a problem in Nigeria. Throw rice into the situation. Every problem can be solved with rice. Nigerians are protesting, you give them rice. Nigerians are complaining there's no power. You're giving them rice to solve the problem. Any country that is not serious about energy security and energy in all forms, whether it's electricity or in transportation or to power your industries, if you are not serious about with your energy security, there's no way you can see meaningful growth. Nigeria today is like the guest speaker has said, Nigeria is plunging into informal sector. People are just doing anything just to survive. We've not had it this bad. We were here when we transited from Abacha, how Nigeria was during Abacha, into where we into the PDP, and now into APC. It's quite a sad day for me, I would say, that we have a government that does not have any plan.
Okay, let's
Ken right now.
Ken, I hear you. Yeah, I mean, good comments. Yeah, comments are fantastic. I want to add a so I can let Doc go. He's been here for 2 hours, and I really want a female. I don't know if she's a female, but I'm trying to add her so I can get a female voice to come in and speak. Caleb, I see your hand up. I'll get you in there. Ken, I think your comments are the same shared across the board. I mean, I hear you when you say, and I know what you're saying, but I hear when you say we're talking negative stuff. Honestly, I wish I could come in to talk about the positives. I wish I could get Dangote to come in and talk about the positives. As a matter of fact, I'll share a positive with you guys. I'm reading the news article right here. Dangote has exported 458 tons of refined petroleum to Cote d'Ivoire, Cameroon, Tanzania, Ghana, and Togo. That's a net export to Nigeria. That's money coming to Nigeria. That's because we have Dangote here. Araluchi, hi. Let me get Araluchi. I hear. Let me get to speak. You're still here. Araluchi, go ahead. Araluchi, you go ahead and speak. Arulabi. Arulabi, go ahead. Going once, going twice, it's off. Ken, go ahead. You want to say something?
Yes, what I wanted to say is Dangote importing crude oil. For me, it's not bad news for the country, because for me, that's value addition for Nigeria.
It's bad news because we have crude oil. I get the point you're making.
Kalu, let me land. What I'm saying now is that even if we want to supply all the crude oil today, we cannot.
Can you guys?
Yeah, we can hear you. Go ahead, real quick. I know your something is bad.
Yeah, my network has been quite poor.
Sure.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening. Hi.
Yeah, so I'd like to ask a question, and it's also a commentary.
Go for it.
Given our history of corruption, how sure are we really that the 1.5 million barrels reported is actually what we are producing right now, and that there is no oil theft like going on at the government level beyond what we are seeing at the bunkering level from the militants and all that. Because Nigerian politicians are not people you really want to trust. We don't have a history of being honest with our politicians, being honest with us. So if we want to really know, how do we know that we are not actually having oil theft going on at federal government level and this money is being used for reasons that does not benefit the whole country? That's my one question. So another point I'd like to raise is that is about the economy and the poverty levels we are seeing in Nigeria. It's really unprecedented. Nigerians have never been this poor. And policies of this government has really turned Nigerians to beggars. With the inflation, what the government could have done if they were really interested in really improving the economy would have been to adjust salaries to match inflation. I have been living in the Gambia now for almost 10 years. And when the Gambia suffered inflation of about how many percent, we had an adjustment in our salaries. Everything changed because the rents went up and cost of transport also went up. The government adjusted salaries to match inflation. But when you look at Nigeria, you realize that no salary adjustment has been made in how many years? If you look at, let me give an example of how much doctors earn. Doctors were earning around $200,000 at 2015. That was about almost $1,000 at the time. Currently, what doctors are earning is house officers. I'm giving an example with house officers. It's still around 240,000 Naira today. That money is not even up to $300. So essentially, they have turned a group of people who were earning somewhere around $1,000 to people who are earning around less than $300 a month. And this is not just doctors. It's just an example of one sector. This cuts across the whole sectors. Nigerians can no longer purchase. They can no longer buy things. And when people say, oh, but the economy is improving, inflation is improving, I'd like to argue against that because my mother is a businesswoman and she paid my fees in another country from her business. And that business was poultry related. We were buying eggs. My mother was doing about hello, can you guys hear me?
I can hear you.
Yeah, so my mother was going about with about 5,000 to 6,000 crates of egg a week. Then when the economy started shaking up, it started dropping. Now, at some point, they were doing about 1,000 crates a week. And even that 1,000 crates, they were struggling to sell because people started considering egg luxury. People were no longer buying eggs. It was no longer a staple on Nigerian tables anymore. People were running away from buying eggs. So that's how the business just kept going down until my mom was like, nah, she's had enough. And she was not the only one. The poultry farmers on the other end also suffered losses. And many of them today are no longer in the business. So when somebody tells me, oh, but the things are improving economically, statistics, but it's not translating to the masses. The people are not benefiting from it. And then another point you made about the government allowing the Naira to be around 1,300, because this current exchange rate does not benefit the Nigerian people in any way. Because how much foreign investors do we have? If local demand and consumption and spending is at the level it is at 2015, Nigerians will not be begging for foreign investors as they are doing right now. This government is not serious about improving the life and circumstances of Nigerians, and it is really, really sad to see. Honestly, very sad.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, we can hear the passion in your voice. I think you speak for many Nigerians, and many folks talk about that. We see an economy where it's headlines, but at the base level, people are suffering. You know, like when I went to Nigeria, I went to the market. I went to mile 12. I went to Ojota market. And I was looking at people. I was talking to them. I was interviewing them. There was a butcher guy I met there, a butcher guy. I'm going to meet him again when I go back. And I asked him, what do you do? He told me 10 years ago, butcher business was simple. You buy a cow, 4 butchers buy a cow, cut the cow up, sell, and make money. He told me right now, there is no amount, no matter how much they cut that cow up, they can never make their money back. So they are all in debt. They just do the business just to pay. It's like a Ponzi scheme. They pay this old guy with the new cow. They can never make as much money. Then I was sitting there with him. I was there the whole day. People will come. How much is meat? They'll look at the meat. They'll drop the meat. Nobody's buying meat. Nobody is buying meat. They just come, look at the meat, go away. You see civil servants that go and buy a bag of okra. They buy the bag of okra for 10,000. Then when you wrap the bag of okra in bags, you sell it for 15,000 when they do the retail bag of okra. That's what people are surviving on. Then they sell the roasted okra for fish meal. You see people that nobody buys meat, so people sell crayfish. People take crayfish and used to make rice. So they do jollof rice with crayfish. They can't afford meat. And this is the real story. I went to them. I was in the market the entire day. And this is what's going on, you know. So when you come back and you hear people saying GDP is going up, you know, if you really go, and I challenge the government people, don't go with your costume. Go and sit in the market with a market woman and just watch how many Nigerians would shop in them. Nobody's buying. The guy told me he used to drink Guinness Stout. Don't drink Guinness Stout anymore. He drinks palm wine. I had pictures and videos. So I hear you, and I think when we do these spaces, right, it's not enough to get angry. I don't want people to get angry. I'm trying to show you the data and the thinking, so that when you are angry, if you meet a house guy tomorrow, you can say, "Why are you guys importing crude oil? Why can't you guys do a subsidy?" Because we know why. You can have the data. You don't have to be an economist, but you know what to say. One problem we have in Nigeria is that we don't know how the economy works. So when we are asking for things, we don't understand the implication. A good example is Ojota riots. When Nigerians went to Ojota and said they do not want the subsidy to go, it looks like a good idea. But you know, so I hear you, and I'm like, when we're about to close, I've kept Doctor here for nearly 2 hours. I don't want his right.
Can I finish my thought, please? Sorry, I just
really quick. But I want to really get Doctor to go. Yeah.
So what I was saying about about Dangote still, importing crude oil. To me, as of today, even if we want to provide all the quantity that Dangote needs, we can't do that because we've spent our revenue for tomorrow. So we don't even have that capacity to give to him. Whatever we are giving to him might probably be what he's giving back to us in equivalent form in terms of PMS and diesel to the Nigerian economy. So I don't care if another Dangote comes up today and set up the same size capacity of facility to refine crude oil in Nigeria. For Nigeria, that is value addition. That's thousands of jobs to Nigerians in Nigeria. But what I would like to say about this whole issue is that the federal government must have a document, a policy document called the Nigerian Energy Security document, whatever you need to call it, something that is holistic, that will protect small businesses. It's really, really critical because it's not the $1 billion in investment into your country that would really, really boost your GDP. You need a constellation of small, micro, medium businesses doing well, thriving. And being able to employ 2 people, 3 people all together, and that is how you provide jobs and you keep them working, you keep them alive. But in a situation where you keep choking this sector of the economy to the point that person selling food to get by with 1 or 2 staff, all of a sudden tells you he cannot go ahead again. That poultry farm that used to sell egg before, all of a sudden is telling you today I cannot fund that business again because it doesn't make sense. The cost is too high. I have to go. Let's not forget that the presidential palace has gone off the grid.
All right, Ken.
They have gone off the grid.
I hear you, Ken.
So Nigerians have been left on their own.
All right.
These are issues we should be talking about. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ken. Doc, I think we'll take last Caleb's hand is up and then we'll let you go for the day. Caleb, real quick. Caleb? All right, Caleb going once, Caleb going twice. Doc, we had a very, very engaging topic for this space today, right?
We can't hear you if you're speaking.
Caleb, thanks, Caleb. Last one for Doc, then we'll call it a day with Doc. Caleb, you want to go real quick? Caleb? Yeah, real quick.
Okay, I'll be very fast. Now, I'm trying to think about all these things and I'm trying to put us together. Could any of this be by design? You think about all the start of the APC regime the APC government from 2015, the way the GDP has declined, the way everything basically has declined. Like, if I were like given a contract to cause that kind of declination, I don't think I would be able to meet up because it just happened in a way that was too unexplainable. And you begin to wonder why are all this happening? Like, you made mention that this current administration since 2015 has never met the lowest of lows of the previous administration prior to 2015. Like, how did we end up in this kind of situation?
I can tell you why. I don't take too much. Let me just give let me tell you what's wrong with the government today. I don't think they have bad advisors or bad managers. I think the point is that, and I'm just my personal opinion, President Tinubu has come to power on a very, very shaky foundation, and he has overpromised everything to everybody to be in power. So when you make a promise to build a road from Sokoto to Badagry, that's a lot of money. When you build a coastal road that's going to pass through Edo, that is not coastal, you leave East-West Road, that's a lot of money. When you do all these promises, your spending goes up, your debt goes up, your borrowing goes up, and look at the revenue side, it hasn't come down. So they've removed subsidy to raise revenues. They've passed a tax reform to raise revenues because they are overspending. Let me give you a data point again to go with. What President Tinubu has raised in revenues in 2024, 2025 is double what Buhari raised maybe in 2 years. So Tinubu is doing record amount of raising of capital. This is before tax reform. But look at the problem. Let me give you a data point. Look at the problem. In 2024, the president said that we're going to spend about 16 trillion or so on infrastructure. They borrowed about, my numbers, I don't give you wrong numbers. The point I'm trying to make is that they borrowed money and they did not use it for infrastructure. They used it to pay salaries. So most of the borrowing they are doing is to pay salaries. The infrastructure is not being funded by the borrowing. Too much spending, that's the problem. If they simply cut down the spending, the economy would just recognize that they can take all that revenues and start to do roads. Imagine if they take all the money. The Coastal Road is the largest infrastructure project in the history of Nigeria. Largest. If they took that same money and they fixed all the roads, Lagos, Ibadan, all the roads in Nigeria, people would have hailed them. If they did that Coastal Road from Lagos and stopped at Lagos, would have had the Coastal Road today. It would have been fantastic. It's a new road to avoid Lekki. But they are doing too much for too many people. Everywhere is construction. You can't. We don't have the money for what they are doing. Minus, they are paying debt. Every Naira that comes to Nigeria, nearly 50% goes to debt service. How can you grow an economy where every Naira you get, 50%, nearly 50% is going to service debt? But still they are borrowing. We're borrowing 2 trillion a month. And you are still saying you want to build road from Sokoto to Badagry. With which money? That's the summary of it all. But let's move on. Let's just get Caleb.
Sorry to just cut in.
Yeah,
Sorry.
no worries.
But the reason I think it's design is because it's like these people were handed a book or a manual that is titled like how to do it wrong.
No, it's not by design. They are caught up in their own propaganda. They believe that whatever they're doing, that they're their own propaganda. They want to succeed. APC does not want to fail. They want to succeed, but they are trying to do too many things too fast. So there is no coordination. Good Luck had a coordinating minister of the economy that coordinated customs, coordinated everybody. The president said we're going to have no food import, no duties on food imports. Customs said no. It took a long time before customs implemented the no food, whatever. A long time. CBN is doing strong Naira, ministry is doing weak Naira and all that. There's no coordination of the economic drive of the president. Customs say they are doing revenue generation. Why is customs making revenues off Nigerians suffering with food? Make that make sense. I have no rice, but you're posting you made 2 billion from taxing me to import rice to eat. Doesn't make any sense. Dr. Wilson, I think we've had an interesting, fantastic session with you. We've brought up a lot of issues. I want you to just, if you can give us a summary, then we'll just let you go. I know I want to thank you for staying with us for nearly 2 hours. Go ahead, Doc.
No, Kalu, I think it's a great session. I understand the frustration because sometimes I look at the numbers a lot. I mean, that's what I do, and I engage,
so before he comes up, let me just add that I feel like the APC wanting to succeed is not serious because you cannot have politicians in places where you should have technocrats and then you think to succeed.
Interesting.
I think that is the biggest failing.
All right. Point taken. Doc,
okay, so as I was saying, as you know, Kalu, I'm not drawn into political party issues. I mean, I look at Nigeria. Government is government. If you are doing right, yes, we say you are doing right. If you are doing wrong, we say you are doing wrong, and that's part of the ethos of the NESG. We're not to say that whether a political party or not. I mean, maybe for political economists, they can decide how decisions are made and how the party influences all of that. But like I was saying, I look at the numbers of every day. I mean, have sessions, present to corporate businesses on some of these and how they can refine their strategy. And so sometimes I can share, I mean, the frustration is you see it in the numbers, sometimes, and it just tells you that, look, we can be better, than where we are now at the moment. I think that's one key thing that drives us to say, look, how can we sustain whatever gains we've had? How can we reduce the cost? There's no government that you would say they didn't have positives or gains. I mean, whether it's even military era, right? There will be. But the point is, how do we ensure that gain is broad-based in a way that many people can feel it? And those that are not feeling it, how can we carry them along? For instance, one key issue is that we always talk about is that government seems to be spending, but the household is tightening their belt, right? How can you ensure that government spending is channeled to the right places to support the household, right? That's one key issue. And I share the sentiment that the lady made, and also Ken in particular, about small business support, because truly that's the live wire of the economy. And if we don't get those millions of small businesses to grow, if we don't get them to expand, to create jobs, there is nothing we can do. All of these gains, it will be built on very shaky foundation. And I think that's where the next level needs to focus on, that how can the industry, trade, and the relevant ministries start making the environment as conducive as possible for those businesses to grow. Otherwise, growth will just be driven by external adjustments or external reforms, FX and the likes. And people will still not feel that impact. There will always be that disconnect between the people and what we're seeing with the rest of the economy. So I think that's one key issue that we need to discuss. And also on the positives, like Ken mentioned, you talked about the Dangote refinery. I agree with all of the points you made, except one, that there's no problem with Dangote importing crude oil. I think it's maybe for now we're not really seeing the impact of it. But if it continues, and especially if it moves to, imagine if Naira gets to 1,600 and Dangote is imported crude oil rather, you can imagine the devastating impact it will have, not just on his firm, but also on the consumers, on his final product. So we must try as much as possible to ensure that our domestic industries are safeguarded in terms of inputs, how they get the inputs, where they get it from, just so we can limit the exposure to price fluctuations from, whether it's crude oil or other products. And in fact, if you want to read more about this, my PhD thesis is online. You can just Google it. This is exactly what, I worked on, as to how do we grow some of our industries in a way that growth is real and growth impacts development, not just that one or two people or persons or companies are growing, and then even that growth is sustainable. Have you ever wondered why anytime the Naira loses value, anytime the Naira goes from, say, 1.3 to 1.5 to 1.6, the first people that cry out the most are the manufacturers? So it's the reason, the part of the reason is because of their exposure to imported inputs. And I think we have to change that. The other thing is also, how do we export more to the rest of the world and produce real goods, just so we can export to the rest of the world. I think that's very important. Then the point that Kalu made as to cut spending, well, maybe this is where I would differ a bit, because I think rather than cut spending, I would argue for a reprioritization of spending. How do we get spending to the right places that we can generate revenue? How do we ensure that we are able to tap all of the idle resources that we have, whether it's our solid minerals? I mean, I'm currently in London and I've attended so many conferences where they're talking about rare earth minerals. I don't think Nigeria, I've never seen any of our ministers or, coming up to challenge or to put, just to be part of that conversation. And I know we have many of those rare earth minerals in our country. How do the next level of, AI and co, they are all tapping into all of these minerals. What structures are we putting? I know Nasarawa is doing a lot in that space. as a state. But from a country level, how are we repositioning all that into ensuring that we can generate as much revenue, attract investment into all that? So that's one area. I don't think it should be about cutting expenditure, but rather how do we ensure that our expenditure currently is efficient? We are spending it to the right places. We are giving support to the vulnerable businesses and individuals that need them. We are building the roads and co. And I've always argued that, look, debt, we can keep borrowing and borrowing. If we are using those money judiciously, and I don't just mean just building roads for building's sake, but mapping out very clear economic value of that road. And you are seeing that the value in the long term justifies or outweighs the cost. And then if you borrow to build such road, there's no problem. I mean, for Nigeria to develop, ideally, it has to be a construction site. In my view, we need more cities. We need development has to spread across. We need more ports. We need, so many infrastructure needs that the country needs, right? So maybe that's why I'll differ a bit as to should we cut spending or should we channel spending to the right sources, and also how do we raise revenue in a way that we can close that fiscal gap. And there are so many untapped, unused, underutilized resources that we have across the country that we're not targeting. Tourism is one. So many. I mean, it feeds in many of the East African countries, a key part of their economy, even Middle East and the likes. How can we make Nigeria safe enough such that people can come in and spend their money in Nigeria without fear, or and also come back, bring people, start local industries, and so many areas, creative, so many aspects that I think are still under-tapped or underutilized that we can focus on. So the final thing I would say is that, somebody mentioned oil outputs as to how are we sure what we're producing is real. And it's a valid concern, because sometimes too, especially if you are not on the field, every day trying to track data, you just make do with what you have. But what I always notice is that OPEC secondary data is often always different from what we always say we produce. So maybe perhaps an oil and gas expert can look into that. But I share your sentiment that, and it's part of it also, it has to do with the low trust that we have in the system. So yeah, that would be it for me. Otherwise, I think that this has been a great space, and always a pleasure to be here.
Thank you, sir. I really do appreciate you for, again, sharing those thoughts with us. Really, really do. I think Nigerians care about Nigeria. We love Nigeria. We want Nigeria to succeed. So anything that is success, we support it, right? So the country just can do better. Angola is not as rich as us in terms of, but they seem to have their oil things sorted out. The sovereign wealth fund is all going there. Cote d'Ivoire seems to be coming up. Ghana a few years ago was broke. They couldn't pay their debt. Now they've done this gold thing. Their currency is back up. They seem to know what they are doing. I think Nigerians need a lot of success and good stories to just let us know that we government guys know what they are doing and that this is going to work out for us. I don't think people really care about politics. People just want to have a good life, send their kids to school, go to a good hospital when they are ill, and just have safety. I think they focus on politics because they want someone to do something and they feel the guys that are there can't do it. So for the politicians out there, we need to see more results and less talk. Too much talk, too much Twitter, too much infographics. We need to see food prices come down, quality of life go up, and security happen. We are doing our own job here to call people to account, to educate Nigerians that tune in about this economy thing, because it's your economy too, right? So thanks, guys, for listening. Dr. Wilson, again, thanks so much for being here with us. I do appreciate your insight and your time to share with us. Also, guys, it's going to be a fantastic Monday. It's going to be a funny Monday. President Trump has told Iran to open the Strait of Hormuz, or he will bomb their power grid. You will know what's going to happen. If US bombs their power grid, Iran has said they're going to bomb the desalination plants and are going to also bomb the Gulf countries' energy output. If they do that, then 20% of oil supply is going to go off grid, which then means that...
And we have a global economic crisis.
Yep. Well,
of an unprecedented scale.
I was getting there, which means that we're going to get prices go up. Fertilizer, food, everything's going to go up. So you want to think very, very carefully about the currency you hold, the investments you make, and what you are doing with your money. Assume the worst, and then if the worst does not happen, then you are okay. So that's what I would say, because everything can end today. I already see the Iranians saying that they didn't close the straits. I'm reading the Iranian foreign minister saying they did not close the strait, that the straits are closed by the insurers in London, not Iran. So they're already backing out, maybe slightly, maybe there's a window there for negotiation. But if they go ahead and bomb their power sector, man, it's going to be a global recession, right? So keep that in mind. But overall, I think, like I've always said from the beginning, if you are investing, look long term. If you're a trader, you are in heaven. If you're a trader, this is your time to make money, taking those bets. But if you're a long-term investor, try to buy those good companies at a cheap price. Again, good companies at a cheap price. Don't buy a cheap company at a cheap price because markets are falling. Look for a good company and buy at a cheap price. That's the way to trade this economy. Thank you so much, guys. I love you all, and I'll see you guys next week once again when we have another session to talk with someone that we can listen to. Thank you, guys. Have a good day, and I'll see you next week. Thank you so much, Dr. Wilson. Everyone that's joined in, you guys take care, and bye.